Hello there. Welcome in to a Monday edition of the show. Still in Vegas and happy to still be in Vegas. More on that in a moment. Pleasure to have you with me, whether you're listening on 740 KVOR, Extra Sports 1300, or the streaming apps of those two fine radio stations, which you can find wherever fine apps are given away because they are free to download, they are free to use, and they're both sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health, and well being for all. If you want to get involved with the program and the veritable cornucopia of sports topics that await you, you can call or text into the show at 719 24/7 1313. Ray Dominguez, producer extraordinaire, standing by to receive your communication. And let's start with why I'm here, why I'm in a shirt and a tie if you're watching the live stream on our social media platforms. What is unfolding here in Las Vegas is really nothing short of remarkable. The Air Force women's basketball team is halfway to a spot in the NCAA tournament. 2 wins down, 2 more to go. Now, they've never won 2 games at the Mountain West tournament. In fact, no Air Force basketball team has won 2 games at the Mountain West tournament ever, whether it be the men or the women. But this is a program that 1 decade ago had a season in which they won 1 game. Not in the tournament. 1 game on the season. It was the year before Chris Gobrecht arrived that Air Force won a game. That's 10 years. That's not ancient history here. That's 10 years ago. They won 1 game, and now they're 2 wins away from clinching a spot in the NCAA tournament. They are in our corner of this town that we inhabit for the Mount West tournament. They're the story. And I, having played 0 role in Air Force's success so far in the tournament, and will play no part in their success if they have some tonight against Boise State, have been approached and texted by more people in the last 24 hours than I've ever spoken to when it comes to Air Force women's basketball. And the question is the same. Can they do this? Can they win these next 2 games? And my answer every time is yes. Yes, they can get these 2 wins tonight and then tomorrow night, either against Colorado State or UNLV. They can go to the NCAA tournament. And there are a few reasons for that. But let me start with the biggest one. The Falcons in each of these next 2 games, Boise State tonight, and regardless of whether they play Colorado State or UNLV, if they're fortunate enough to make it past tonight and go to the Mountain West title game, they would have the best player on the floor. And we've talked about how important that is when it comes to the Nuggets for a 7-game series, to have the best player on the court. That's what Air Force has, and they're in a one-off situation. It's 1 game each night against a different opponent. But regardless of that opponent, and yesterday proved this, Air Force has the best player in every game. Now, I have called the vast majority of Milani Perry's games at Air Force. I have seen her put on awesome performances a number of times. What I saw on Sunday was the best game she's ever played. 33 points, to eliminate the number 1 seed in the tournament, San Diego State, a team that coming in had lost all of one time in conference play. 19-1 they were. And Milani was going head-to-head with a player in Nala Williams who had just been named the Mountain West Player of the Year the previous day. And Milani proceeded to outscore her by 24 points and out-rebound her by 7. Let's not forget that stat. It's not as eye-popping as the 33, but she had 9 rebounds. What Sunday reminded me of, remember that year where Nikola Jokic lost the MVP to Joel Embiid? And Nikola Jokic proceeded to lay waste to every team that faced the Denver Nuggets in the playoffs en route to a championship. And it left a lot of the MVP voters kind of wondering whether they made a mistake. Now, regular season is the regular season. Postseason is the postseason. You have to make your decision based on what you saw during the regular season. But there was an argument to be made that Milani Perry was the Mountain West Player of the Year during the regular season. I know I heard an interview last night with Gordy Presnell, the head coach of Boise State, after they beat New Mexico. And he was asked his thoughts on tonight's game. And he said, we're going to be going up against the best player in the conference, and I voted for her to be the Mountain West Player of the Year. But enough coaches didn't. And while what Milani Perry has done in the last 2 games is not, doesn't factor into that voting, I got to imagine some coaches are wondering if by simply going best player on best team during the regular season was the right call. And whether overlooking or not voting for Milani Perry because of where Air Force finished the regular season, to say nothing of where Air Force would be without Milani Perry, they might be wondering if they made a little bit of a mistake. Now, just like that year with Nikola Jokic, proving coaches who didn't vote for her for Mountain West Player they were wrong is not Milani Perry's motivation. Nor was it the motivation of Nikola Jokic to thumb his nose at the MVP voters that year. It was to do exactly what he ended up doing, which was lead the Denver Nuggets to a championship. And right now, Milani Perry's only focus is keeping her career at Air Force going for as long as she possibly can. But she was spectacular yesterday. Spectacular. And something that Stacey McIntyre said after the game in the post-game press conference, called Milani Perry a game changer, which is true, factually correct. But then went on to talk about how proud she was of the entire team and how they executed their game plan. Because Milani Perry hasn't been doing it alone. She's just been the headline. And the second reason why I think Air Force has a real chance of continuing to make history is because of what Stacey McIntyre said yesterday in the postgame, how proud she was of her team for being able to execute the game plan. And the reason why is because the game plan tonight against Boise State is going to be very similar to San Diego State. Going from Wyoming to San Diego State, that was 2 very different game plans, 2 very different tempos at which Air Force wanted to play the game. And to their credit, they were able to shift from one to the next almost seamlessly. But tonight's not going to be a lot of adjustments. The players change, and obviously the skill sets of those particular players are different. But the main priority tonight is the same as it was Sunday against San Diego State. Air Force has to slow the pace down. Fewer possessions in the game. They can't get into a track meet with Boise State. And Air Force, that's kind of what they do. The problem with Wyoming and why they've been such a pain until Saturday is because they're the only team in the league that wants to play at a slower pace than Air Force does. But Air Force, with their defense all season long, has been slowing the pace of some of these run and gun teams like Boise State and like San Diego State. They just hadn't done it to the level that they did it on Sunday. But they'll have to do that again against Boise State. So there's not a huge adjustment, I think, from one day to the next for Air Force. There is a little bit with Boise State going from playing New Mexico to playing Air Force. So there's another thing that kind of goes in Air Force's favor in this one tonight. But a lot of the things that I just said or being said about Air Force, I remember saying both times Air Force played San Diego State this year on the pregame broadcast that I believe that Air Force, despite the discrepancy in record, has what it takes to beat San Diego State. Now, don't make me out to be a prophet, because the two times I said that during the regular season, Air Force lost, and they lost by a decent margin. But I saw that matchup and why Air Force could have some success. And it was those things coupled with them taking their game to a level that I have not seen them play at all year long, and Milani Perry having the best game of her career. You throw all that together, and that's why Air Force shocked the Mountain West in beating San Diego State on Sunday. But now, and I was talking to someone about this yesterday. I wonder what kind of a block San Diego State was in this regard. I don't know how you can see past a matchup with the number one team in the conference that went 19-1, that just had beaten you on your home floor on Tuesday and spoiled senior night. I don't know how you can look past that at the bigger goal. Obviously, Air Force came here to Vegas with the same goal as everybody else did, and that's to win the Mountain West and get maybe the only bid the Mountain West is going to get to the women's basketball tournament. But it's hard to see that number one seed waiting for you if you were able to get past Saturday. It's hard to see past that. And I wonder now that they beat San Diego State, how they kind of deal with all of that now that it's more real than it was even 24 hours ago. So it's going to be a little bit different dynamic here. But Air Force has to feel like they got as good a shot as anybody of these last four teams. The way they've played. But again, another side to this. And Boise State was waiting in the tunnel yesterday, watching Air Force finish off San Diego State. And UNLV and CSU were watching too. The other three teams remaining in this bracket have the exact same feeling Air Force does. Air Force busted this bracket wide open. So now all four of these teams And heck, even the 3 teams yesterday that, lost. New Mexico, in Grand Canyon, and Fresno State. They had to feel like that was the first game of the day yesterday, was Air Force knocking off San Diego State. It had to make every other team feel like, "We can do this. We don't have to go through San Diego State. Air Force did the hard part." So there are 4 teams arriving at the Thomas and Mack Center here in the next hour or so that feel like it is very possible for them to make the NCAA tournament when just 24 to 48 hours ago, or at least certainly coming here to Las Vegas maybe didn't seem as possible. But Air Force has to be the most confident of the group, having knocked off San Diego State and playing at the level they're playing at. And I can't wait for this game. Hopefully you'll be able to join me at 6 o'clock. And the number of people going back to that I've heard from, that's just really cool. It's really cool that this team is getting the attention it deserves after a phenomenal 2 days here out in Vegas. 6 o'clock Mountain Time. Boise State and Air Force in the Mountain West semifinal. We'll shift gears coming up next. Why a Broncos team that many thought was going to be the loudest of NFL free agency has so far, a few hours in, been the quietest. You're listening to 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300. The other basketball game tonight of note is the Nuggets and the Thunder. Big week for the Nuggets. They got the three teams ahead of them: OKC, Houston, and San Antonio, all coming up this week. So, kind of similar to what this past weekend was for the Colorado Avalanche. And the Avs got it done. Nazem Kadri even made his debut in yesterday's win over the Minnesota Wild, had an assist. So Nuggets, their turn it starts tonight with that eagerly awaited rematch with the Thunder that will tip off at 5:30, and I think it's on Peacock, I believe, NBC game. NFL free agency, the tampering period has opened up. Deals can't be made official yet, but that we know that that doesn't stop anybody. Free agency is about over, and it's not even 3:30 on the first day. But there was it was an NBC producer, Dan Olmeyer. You may know the name, maybe not. Doesn't matter. Uh, hmm, yeah. Okay. Let's try this again, shall we? Apologize for the technical issues here as I'm doing the show live from Las Vegas. So, again, NBC producer Dan Omeyer would say if your question is about sports, the answer to that question is money. Now, the Broncos have not made a move in free agency yet because of money, the money that they are unwilling to spend, unwilling to make Kenneth Walker one of the top three highest paid running backs in football, and unwilling to pay Travis Etienne the reported $13 million a year to keep him from going home to Louisiana. But they were willing to offer enough to keep J.K. Dobbins for 2 more years because it is cheaper to retain your own free agents than to go out and get others. And that's not new. That's always been the case when it comes to free agency. But the question is why? Why aren't the Denver Broncos willing to pay a premium to upgrade at the running back position or the wide receiver position? Because they've been on the sidelines for that market as well. So far, anyway. Now, look, the thing with J.K. Dobbins, let's understand what I'm saying. They get bang for their buck for J.K. Dobbins. Okay, this isn't revisionist history. J.K. Dobbins was good for the Denver Broncos last year. That's not what I'm saying. On a per carry basis, Dobbins had a better average than Etienne or Kenneth Walker last year. But the reason why that J.K. Dobbins didn't have as good of a season all told as Kenneth Walker or Travis Etienne is the very reason why you should be at least mildly disappointed that if you're a Broncos fan. Kenneth Walker over the last 4 years, the span of his career, 59 games he's played. Travis Etienne, 66 games over the last 4 years. J.K. Dobbins, 32 games. And he was hurt when the Broncos needed him the most in the AFC Championship. If he's on the field, it'll be fine. But if the 2 games, and 2 in particular I'm thinking about with Kansas City, that might ultimately decide the AFC West next year, and Kenneth Walker is on the field, and J.K. Dobbins isn't, that's where this is going to draw some criticism. Because going into it, the player with the injury concerns is J.K. Dobbins. And it's what I wonder about the Broncos at this stage in their arc in the Sean Payton era. Okay? They've done it a certain way, right? They've done it with being very particular about who they bring in. A lot of Sean Payton guys, right? And they've done it with a lower budget, right? They've taken some chances on guys with injury concerns and things like that because they had to. Well, now they don't have to. And I'm not saying they have to spend like drunken sailors, but there are some positions that need upgrading, and running back is one of them. And I wonder if because it has worked to this point, the Broncos see no reason to deviate. And what I would say to that is that there is always a time where the moment is right for you to make the move, right? To get that player, that final puzzle piece to put it all together if you're going to win a championship, right? Aaron Gordon to the Denver Nuggets was that. Avalanche are thinking that Nazem Kadri this year is going to be that. Neither came cheap, by the way, right? Both in what they gave up to get those two guys, but also what they make or what Aaron Gordon ended up making, I suppose. So those guys didn't come cheap. But the Nuggets, Aaron Gordon was worth every penny, and the Avalanche are feeling that Nazem Kadri will be worth both the picks they gave up and the players they gave up and the money that they're going to be paying him. And I wonder, what is that move for the Denver Broncos? And are they willing to make that kind of move? Now, there's something to be said for liking what you have. And there's a lot to like with the Denver Broncos. Justin Strnad, perfect example. They just signed him to an extension. I like that signing. I don't see why you need to sign Alex Singleton now, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But this is a different animal. This is where what you have in-house may not be the best you can do. The Broncos have to be more balanced offensively. And you're betting on a guy, again, whose health, through no fault of his own, this isn't casting aspersions on J.K. Dobbins. This is just the reality of the situation. His health has been a concern, and you just kind of got burned by that at the most important point in your season. Is that worth saving a few bucks? You normally think the more money you spend, the bigger risk. In this case, the less money the Broncos spend, the higher the risk. And this is a season where the Broncos need to eliminate as much of their risk as you can. They got to prevent the bottom from falling out, from that regression happening. If Dobbins gets hurt, they aren't going back to the AFC Championship, much less one step further. If he's on the field, it's fine. If he's not, especially now with Kenneth Walker in the same division, player that I put at the top of the list for the Denver Broncos because he's exactly what they need, which coincidentally is exactly what Kansas City needs, and he goes in your division, I mean, this is kind of like Miko Rantanen ending up on the Dallas Stars. You didn't want this guy, quote unquote, want this guy for one reason or another. Or you couldn't get him for one reason or another. And he ends up right in your backyard. And you'll have to go through him. Not a great start to free agency for the Denver Broncos. Take your thoughts, 719-247-1313. More Drive Time Sports after this on 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300. So the legal tampering period in the NFL has begun, and basically everybody has already uh, signed with, with teams. Of course, all this started with the what may go down as the biggest move, I think, of this free agency period, which of course is the Friday night trade that landed Max Crosby in Baltimore. And I looked out my window last night here at my hotel because I can see Allegiant Stadium where the Raiders play, just seeing if there was like a light on or something. I didn't notice when the trade went down. But, Ray and I were having a conversation a couple days ago now about just kind of where every team sits going into free agency. And we know that the AFC was down this year, right? Buffalo wasn't as good as they normally are. Baltimore, same thing. Kansas City, lot of upheaval, lot of week to week. Do we believe in this team? Do we believe in that team? So the AFC overall is down. So it's hard to, before free agency and the draft, really buy into one particular team, right? Because everybody had flaws. The AFC was the I'm not okay, you're okay, but that and not okay, but we're okay thing. The one team I did mention that I would buy into before free agency began, and Ray can back me up on this, it was Baltimore. Because one of the few moves that you can make before free agency begins, hiring a coach if you need it. I think that the Baltimore Ravens did a great job getting Jesse Minter. And he will help them on the side of the football that they need the most help with. And I do think that the Baltimore Ravens, part of the reason, I would say the reasons for failing to meet expectation are twofold. One, because their defense was not great. And two, because the relationship with John Harbaugh had grown stale, let's say. Kind of like the Nuggets thing, not as bad perhaps, but kind of the same idea. Like they're successful enough, but clearly they've plateaued. And part of the reason they plateaued is because they're hearing the same voice over and over again. And by getting Jesse Minter, you kind of do something to address both of those things. And then you go out and get the most significant player that anybody could get in Max Crosby. So I'll double down on Baltimore and what they could be this upcoming season, with still the draft and the rest of free agency still to go. But think about that division now. You have TJ Watt, you have Myles Garrett, and you have Max Crosby. Three of the best pass rushers in the league. And I took a moment. I took a moment to send my thoughts to Joe Burrow, because he was already having a rough go of it as it is in that division, staying healthy and staying upright. And now the Ravens have Max Crosby. So I love what the Ravens did. And by the way, just for the other side of that trade, good on the Raiders. I mean, they're a year late. That charade last year that I foolishly somewhat bought into. Not that I thought that the Raiders would be even sniffing the playoffs, but just the idea that they'd be kind of a tough out. They weren't a tough out at all. And it just put them a year behind their rebuild. You got 3 teams in the division that you have no hope of catching anytime soon. 3 teams. And last time I checked, nowhere in the history of the NFL has all 4 teams in the division made the playoffs. So the Raiders had no chance. And I didn't and when I say I bought into it, I just bought into it that I didn't buy into that it was a good idea. I just thought that the Raiders would win more games than they did this year. It was the wrong move right away because they need to go on a full-blown rebuild and see if they can't be on the come up when some of these other teams are on their way back down. I would be looking at Kansas City, most notably in that, given their age and some of these players. Travis Kelce's coming back, Chris Jones is back, but they're not going to be around forever. So this is the right move by the Raiders. And you have 2 first-round picks this year. You have 2 first-round picks next year. You're going to get Fernando Mendoza. You signed Tyler Lindenbaum. That's one L that the Ravens took in free agency. And they Raiders signed a nickel corner, I think. It's pretty good. So the Raiders are finally doing it the right way, and I like Clint Kubiak. So, I mean, check back in about 3 years, but just it was necessary, and we'll see what the Raiders do with these. We know what they're doing with one of their 4 first-round picks over the next 2 years. So I like that. Michael Pittman to Pittsburgh, good move. Now the question is who's going to be throwing him and DK Metcalf the football. Tua signing in Atlanta tells me that Atlanta's willing to give it another go with Michael Penix. Now, Tua could beat out Michael Penix, but just the idea, like, if you bring in, like, for example, I think if you bring in Kyler Murray, and it's funny because statistically, Kyler Murray and Tua Tagovailoa are not that much different, but there's just more of a feeling that you might be able to do something with Kyler Murray in a different place than you can with Tua. Tua feels broken, for lack of a better word. It just feels like we've seen the best football Tua is going to play. And there's nowhere to go but down. Whereas with Kyler Murray, the circumstances of him in Arizona, maybe this makes him a little bit more focused on football. The last couple of years, he had a defensive-minded head coach. I think there's more of a feeling that there's something that you can get with Kyler Murray. And I said this from the beginning. He should be in Minnesota right now. He should be waiting for Kevin O'Connell, begging Kevin O'Connell to give him a contract. Atlanta wouldn't have been a bad landing spot by any stretch of the imagination for Kyler Murray. But, I mean, Atlanta is one of those franchises where, like, how many times are we going to buy into what they're selling? Every year, Atlanta, with all the offensive talent we think has a chance to do something, and they never do. So, oh, what? Go ahead, Ray. And then that if they're releasing Greenlaw, that means that they're signing Singleton. I would have, and I said this last week, And thanks for that, Ray. That important breaking news there with the Denver Broncos. Again, if you did not catch that, Alex Singleton is coming back to the Denver Broncos. The Broncos already signed Justin Stranant, so that's the two they're going with, which I find a bit ironic, if I'm being honest, because last segment I'm talking about how the Broncos are betting on a guy with injury concerns in J.K. Dobbins, and they're totally fine with that. But Dre Greenlaw, they're like, no, we can't. We don't want to mess around with this guy anymore. I don't. It wouldn't have been the route that I would have gone. It's at a position where I think you can afford a little bit to take that risk with Dre Greenlaw, with Justin Stranand the other spot at inside linebacker. It wouldn't have been the way I would have gone. But clear at the very least, there wasn't enough room in Denver for the three of them. So Denver had to make its choice with two of them. I would have gone Stranand and Greenlaw. The Broncos go Singleton and Stranand. So again, it's the Denver Broncos. They haven't brought in one guy from the outside yet, Ray, have they? Yeah. Meanwhile, John Franklin Myers, as expected, left the Denver Broncos. He's signing in Tennessee. Yeah, go ahead, Ray. Yeah. Well, and that's what I'm saying. That's why this has to be such a disappointing start to free agency for the Denver Broncos because, as I teed up in my first segment, they were expected to be the loudest team. And now all of these pieces that you think would look good in a Broncos uniform are off the board. Alec Pierce is going back to Indianapolis. I knew that was kind of a dicey one to give that guy $30 million, but if money was no object, then I think he would fit in very well with the Denver Broncos. I don't know, status quo. That's what the Broncos are going with. And we'll see where they go from here. But right now, it's status quo. And is that what you were expecting if you're a Broncos fan? Is that what you were hoping if you're a Broncos fan? I can't imagine that it is. You want to keep some of your guys. Again, Justin Stranand. I like it. And I may slightly disagree with bringing back Alex Singleton over taking another chance this year on Dre Greenlaw. But the Broncos have some options in-house. This is not a broken organization. This is not a team rebuilding. But there were definite upgrades at positions of need, and they've missed on all of them. And free agency is almost over. Coming up next, my thoughts on what I'm doing out here in Vegas and the remarkable run for Air Force women's basketball that is hopefully continuing tonight at 6. Air Force and Boise State Mountain West semifinals on Extra Sports 1300.